I'll be honest with you. My parents are super religious. I'm about to get married, and they're going to give me a crap ton of money so I can use on my dream wedding. However, they have very specific rules that I must follow, and the biggest one is this. I must get married in their church. Well, I don't want to do that. So I have to come up with some sort of plan. I can still get that money, but use it where I want the venue to be. So, who do I ask for help from? No one else other than my grandma. I'm 24 female, and to be honest with you, I'm struggling with my parents, and it seems to always get worse rather than better. I feel like I'm constantly bashing my head against the wall when I try to talk to them, and our relationship is on the verge of disintegrating completely. Everything I do is wrong, and I feel as though I'm constantly fighting for approval from them, and that's how it may have been my whole life. My fiance, Max, he tells me I need to cut them out, directly out of my life before they break me down. But no matter what, I still want a relationship with my mom and dad. However, the way things are going now, I'm not sure I can hold this together. I wish I could say this is a new problem, but it's something that I've lived with since I was a child. And I just hoped over and over that they would mellow and let me live the life I want. I guess I should give you some background as the problem I'm facing at the moment will not make much sense without context of the things that's happened over my lifetime. My mom, Anna, is an extremely religious woman, and my dad, Michael, is a deacon at our church. And so we were raised to have faith and attend faith school. As I grew up, I was not sure where I was in terms of faith, but I was not as religious as my parents or my sister, Naomi, who is also the family's golden child and 3 years older than me. She's done everything right in the eyes of my parents. Well, mainly my mom. She's the most judgmental person, to be honest. For my part, I was sure from an early age that I wanted to go to university, as I had my heart set on being a veterinary surgeon. And that was my main focus. I also wanted to live my life and not be tied down by the things my mom thought a good girl should do. Anyways, I worked hard at school and I was accepted into the university that I was aiming for, and I'm loving every minute of my degree. I specialized in large animal care as I love horses and farm animals, and well, I got a job with a firm that works with local farms and horse yards that are paying for my education on the understanding I will work for them when I'm qualified. It's hard, dirty work, but I love every minute of it. The thing is that no, it's not ladylike, which my mom hates. At university, I met Max, and we were friends for a year before we even thought about dating. And well, we've been together since my second year at uni. He has finished his degree as it was shorter than mine and works for a local tech firm as a junior. One of the benefits of my work university combined life is that they provide an apartment with a car, as I'm on call for all emergencies that come up, and are also at the staff. Max moved in with me when he finished his education, as it made sense at the time. We had already said that we planned to get married one day, as we knew we were meant for each other. This was where the problems with my parents started in terms of my relationship with Max. You see, if I was going to be a good daughter like Naomi, I would have dated Max, got engaged, and then got married without living together first, or having any intimate contact of any kind. I failed on most of those requirements, as I believe you only get to know a person once you live together, and get to know each other than on an intimate level. Naomi met her husband at church, dated, and got married within a year of meeting, and then had 2 children. She stays at home and keeps the house nice and looks after the kids. Now, please don't think I'm saying being a stay-at-home mom is a bad thing. It's just simply not for me. Naomi had a big church wedding, and it was beautiful in its own way, but again, it's not for me. My parents don't accept anything other than the marriage between men and women, and my Aunt Lizzie is a civil partnership with her partner of 20 years, Emma. And my mom's not talked to her sister since she came out. I'm close to my aunt, as my grandmother Hetty always made sure that we had contact with Lizzie as we were growing up. My grandmother is an amazing woman. She's 84 years of age, and she's always a woman of faith. But she's nothing like my parents and thinks that people should be allowed to love whoever or whomever they want, and that other people should mind their own darn business. I've always been close to my grandmother. I want to be like her when I'm an old woman, feisty and full of life. Anyways, as you can see, my family's not exactly a model family in terms of support and love. I do try my best not to upset my parents because no matter what, I do love them even when they're driving me insane. I hope that gives you an idea of what my parents are like and why I'm having some worries about the next stage of my life. Max proposed to me and I said yes. I was not expecting it at all because even though we had talked about marriage, I thought that we would wait until we were both in a more stable financial position, as I'm still not fully qualified, and Max is a junior in his firm. Max said that he thought about the waiting part, but to him, he didn't care if we were well off or not. He loved me and wanted to commit his life to me forever. I cried when he said that, as though the thought of someone loving me that much was definitely overwhelming. We've not told my parents yet, but I've told my aunt and grandmother. They were both extremely happy for us, but agreed to keep it between us until I got the courage to tell my parents. I don't think that my parents will be against the marriage, although they would probably suggest that we wait a while, as we're not in a stable financial position, and I do agree. The problem they will have is that I don't want a big church wedding. It's not me at all, and I feel that getting married in a church would be wrong, as neither Max or I fully believe in God like my parents do, and would prefer to get married in a venue that represents who we are. My ideal wedding would be at a large horse farm, where I do a lot of work as they hire their beautiful house and grounds out for the wedding. When I told my grandmother that, she laughed and said, "Your mother would probably faint if you ever told her that." This is the issue where I feel that outsiders may judge me a little. You see, as I said, Max and I don't have the money to pay for a wedding, and I'm relying on the wedding fund that my parents have put aside for me. My entire life, my mom's gone on and on about this fund, and how we are grown up and commit our lives to the man who loves us and protects us. The fund will pay for a beautiful wedding, a beautiful honeymoon, and a cash gift to start us off in a married life. However, as with all things in life, there are conditions to the release of the funds, and I have to sign a contract when I was about 11 years old, saying that I agreed to the terms, and I would ask at that point, who the heck makes their children sign a contract at 11 years old, let alone ever? All that aside, to get access to my wedding fund, I had to agree that I would get married in my dad's church, attend marriage preparation classes, stay pure, and live a good Christian lifestyle. Well, I assume I don't have to lay out in writing while I'll have a problem arguing that I honored that contract. My grandmother did say that she was sure that my parents would overlook some of the requirements, as if they did not think they would have to admit to their equally religious friends that they've raised a child who had strayed away, and that would cause them to lose faith. The point they will not let go is, though, the church wedding, and that's not a compromise I'm willing to make. I'm going to have a meal with my parents and sister this evening. I'm going to tell them that I am getting married, and that I don't want a church wedding. I'm expecting that they'll give me an extremely hard time about the subject, and Max has refused to come because he's very outspoken, and he would probably say something he regretted. He thinks I should just cut my losses and tell my parents that if they do not support us, then we will not need to cut our contact, it will happen, and then we'll find a way to pay for the wedding ourselves. I don't want to do that. My whole life I've been told they will pay for the wedding, and I want to have the same as Naomi did, but without the church. Am I being selfish to think that's right? Should I be waiting until I can pay for the wedding myself? I don't know. Anyways, let me know what you think and what you would do in the comment section below. I may not listen, but I thought it would be interesting to see what people look like from an outside thought. Update number 1. I have to say that the range of opinions on this has been incredible. To those of you who had suggestions, thank you. To those who called me a money grabber and an entitled brat, well, you know where you can shove those opinions. Regardless of everything, as I always do, I will be doing this my own way. I met my parents last night, and it started off on a bad foot, and went steadily downhill from the first moment I even arrived. When I walked in, my dad asked where Max was, and I said that he had not been able to come, but he sends his regards. My mom scowled and said that they only asked for us to come home once a month for a meal with the family, and if Max could not be bothered to do that, he was really the right man for me or no. He obviously did not take his responsibility seriously, and my mom's never liked Max, so she's always looking for a way to put him down. I did not raise to her baiting, and I was grateful to see my grandmother was already there, so I would at least have some sort of support. When I made my announcement, Naomi and her family were there, and she was gushing about some mundane thing that she had done that week, and managed to get her own little dig in about my appearance before I even took my coat off. I had come from work, so I had an old pair of jeans, a checked shirt, and work boots. She said, as an aside to her husband in a stage whisper, that wasn't he glad that she was much more feminine than I was, and did not wear men's clothing. I said that waddling around in a cow muck and a dress and sandals was not really a good look. But then what would she know, as she had not worked a day in her life? She sulked for the rest of the night, and her husband sat glaring at me as if I was the devil for what I said. My grandmother whispered to me to behave myself, and I really tried. But I find my family absolutely infuriating, and I'm just tired of defending how I live my life. We settled into an uneasy conversation, where I mainly listened, as it was less dangerous than trying to take part. Also, I had nothing in common with my mom or my sister. I chatted with my grandma for most of the parts. After we ate the main meal, my grandmother kicked me under the table. I mean, she really is a bad influence on me. And I took a deep break, and I told my parents that Max had proposed. And I said yes. To my surprise, my mom was extremely happy and was gushing about how amazing it was. That wasn't what I expected at all until she starts going on about how finally I would not be living in sin, and I would be a respectable married woman who she could talk about to her friends. Well, that came as a shock that she did not talk about me with her friends anyways. I assumed she would at least be proud of some of my achievements. I listened to her as she babbled on and told my dad about how happy she was, and I let her because I knew that once I told her where I wanted my wedding, whoa, that happiness would disappear. The first sign that my dad was not happy came next, as he raised his eyebrow in the way he used to when we were children, and we did something that made him annoyed and asked why Max had not approached him to ask for his permission to marry his own daughter. I opened and closed my mouth like a goldfish, because I was not sure how to answer that without offending him. But my grandmother beat me to it, saying, "For goodness sake, Michael, it's the 21st century. You know you don't own your daughter, right? She's not an object." Well, I smiled. Thank you, looking at my grandma, while it's Naomi's husband had to say, "Oh, well, Hetty, I'm pleased to say I did things the correct way." My grandma muttered, "Of course you did," underneath her breath, but mainly ignored him. She was never a fan of Naomi's husband, and neither am I, which is why he's not getting named in this. I had a feeling that I could not make things worse, and so I said that Max and I did not want to have a big church wedding, as it was not as though we went to church, and it felt wrong to pretend that we did. That is when things went to hell. My mom cried, my dad shouted about how if there's no church wedding, then there will be no wedding at all. And my sister sat and smugly smirked at her husband. It's made me extremely clear to me that unless I agreed to marry at the church, I would get no financial support from my parents, and they would not attend whatever, quote, fake wedding I organized. You see, to my parents, unless you get married in a church, your marriage is not legitimate and you may as well be living in sin. Without the church, they would not accept it that I was a married woman and would consider any children I have to be illegitimate. I hate to admit this, but I beg them to listen to me and see things from my point of view just for once. But in the end, my grandmother said, well, we should leave and let everybody calm down. My dad told my grandmother to talk some sense into me, and once I agreed to a church wedding, they would release the money that they've put away for me. I cried all the way out of the car, but my grandmother told me to pull myself together and call Max to meet us back at Auntie's house. I had no idea why, but my grandmother was adamant, and so I did just as that. And I drove my grandmother to my aunt's house. Once we got there, my aunt raised her eyebrows at my red, splotchy, tear-stained face and said, "They took it well, I see," and gave me a tight hug and, well, led me inside to wait for Max. When I sat down, my grandmother smiled and said, "Don't you worry, sweetie. We have a plan. Did you really think we were going to let you down?" I had no idea what she meant, but I was too upset to fully process what exactly was happening. I wasn't sure what I was the most upset about. The fact that I was unable to have the wedding I wanted due to me being denied wedding funds, or that my parents would not even come. I just felt so overwhelmed and upset, and all I had the energy to do was curl up on the sofa under a blanket and just wait for Max. Update number 2. I'm sorry I did not complete the full story last night. I drank too much wine and fell asleep. I was worried when I looked back this morning that there would be an update that made no sense, but I think the last one made most sense, My grandmother told me that she had a plan, and she was not kidding. She had come to my parents knowing that it was all going to get out of hand, and that I would need their support, but she also had been talking to my aunt about what would happen when I was inevitably denied any financial support by my parents. My grandmother is fairly well off, and in theory she could afford to help me out, but she agrees with me that it's unfair that Naomi was giving the wedding of her dreams, but I'm being denied mine just because of my religious views are different from theirs. My grandmother does not believe that love should be dependent on me bending to their way of life. Love is unconditional, and my grandmother is angry that my mom changed so much when she married my father and disowned her own sister. That saying, threatening to disown one of her daughters is a step too far for my grandmother. So between them, my grandmother and my aunt formed a backup plan, and I said to Max this morning that I would never get on the wrong side of my grandmother as she's so scary when she wants to be. So, without any further delay, here's the plan that my grandmother has decided to put in place for me. First things first, I'm going to call my dad this morning, and I'm going to be perfect, respectful, and repentant daughter, who will agree that my parents were right and I should respect them and have a proper wedding at the church, which will make sure that their friends see they have another dutiful daughter. I'll agree with the big white dress and the vows where I swear to obey my husband, and I'll agree to raise any children in faith. It's going to be a hard sell, as it'll be a struggle to make it believable, to be honest. My grandmother will speak to my dad and will offer to do the marriage prep with me to make sure I'm, quote, behaving and learning to be a good Christian wife. Well, she's also going to suggest that she supervises all my wedding shopping to make sure I'm sticking to the rules. My dad will agree to that as he knows I respect my grandmother more than my mom. I will agree to them inviting their church friends to the wedding and having a say on where we go on our honeymoon. Basically, I'm agreeing to be exactly like my sister. And if I do that, the money will be released and I can have a great wedding. When my grandmother was saying all this, I felt betrayed at first because she has always been the one person I could rely on. So I was confused. But I saw out of the corner of my eye my aunt and her partner laughing at the look on my face. My grandma took a drink of her wine before saying, "Of course, it'll all be a lie, and we'll be doing the opposite completely of whatever we tell your parents." I nearly choked on my drink, and Max was absolutely speechless next to me. The reason that my grandmother wants control of the planning and money is that we will not be getting married in the church. We will be arranging the marriage at the horse ranch where I want to get married. I'll be getting the dress that I want, and we'll be inviting the people we want there. I said that whilst I loved the idea of this, I was so happy she would do this for me. My parents would stop it in the tracks as soon as they realized what happened, and we've lied to them. But my grandmother said, hey, trust her. She would handle that side of things no problem. I asked why she was risking her relationship with my mother for me, and my mom is still her daughter. No matter how much my grandmother disagrees with how she's treating me, my grandmother leaned over and stroked my hair as she used to when I was a little girl. And I've been told off by my parents, and told me that she was tired of seeing how my mom had become a judgmental woman who decided who deserved to be loved and who didn't. She didn't raise my mom to be like that, and it broke her heart that my mom had disowned my aunt for loving another human, and was threatening me as well. My grandmother said it was time someone stood up to my parents, and this was the way of us to fight back, showing them that their version of God's love was not the right one. I cannot say this enough. I love my grandmother so much, and by the end of that statement, we were all crying like babies. Even Max, although he'll deny that until the end of times. That night, I truly felt for the first time that I was actually going to get the wedding of my dreams. And so we began to plan, and I left the details of how to hide it from my parents to my grandmother and my aunt. I'll be in charge of planning the actual wedding. I was still not sure we could pull it off, but hey, it's worth a try. So, the plan's obviously a development as we go. But that night, we put the basics in place, and I'm taking the risk of saying this online. Yeah, a bit of my parents don't do social media, and neither does my sister. In fact, they see the internet as a tool for leading godly people astray. So, I'm probably safe that they'll discover this. This is the plan we have, but whether it'll work will be a story for after the wedding. My grandmother and aunt are going to handle the invitations for everyone my mom wants invited, and I'll do the ones for people I actually want there, which will be hand-delivered after the, quote, fake invitations go out. I'll need to talk to my close friends and make sure they keep the information themselves, that the venue is not the one on the official invitations. We will have to talk to the priest, but my grandmother's dealing with that. F.R. Edwards is a lovely old man. I'm pretty sure he has a crush on my grandmother. My grandmother says she thinks Edwards is also fed up with my dad for his small-minded view on religion. He has only been the priest of the church for 2 years, and he came from a more liberal parish. So, this is the plan. And we trick my parents into paying for the wedding of my dreams, whilst they think they're paying for the wedding of their dreams. Simple. I'm kidding, it's anything but simple. I'll not be able to update again until after the wedding, but I promise I'll let people know what happens one way or the other. At least, if I remember, the wedding is a year away. This could all go horribly wrong, but it'll be an adventure either way. Update number 3, almost exactly a year later. Well, I promised I would be back, and here I am, and I'm married. So you can see that a wedding took place, but which one, you ask yourself? I mean, you're probably not asking yourself, but it sounded good in my head. For over a year, I was living on the edge as we tried to plan a wedding that my parents didn't know about. There were a few times when I thought I've blown it all, and they would find out, but we managed to keep it to ourselves. After the planning meetings with my grandmother and aunt, I went meekly to my parents and apologized, saying I appreciate them and that I should not be ungrateful, and I was prepared to have the church wedding for them. My grandmother came with me, so it looked as though she had talked some sense into me. As she predicted, my parents were happy to hand the finances over to her to control, as though my mom wanted her daughter to have the protection little perfect church wedding. She did not like me enough to actually help make it happen. My grandmother asked for a list of people to send invitations to, and we were ready to get started with our own planning. My grandmother went to talk to Fr. Edwards, and she assured me he was on board with the plan. He even offered to come to the real venue to marry me, which, I agreed to. In a petty way, it was another way to rub my parents' faces with the fact that I wanted to go my own way. So, I booked the horse ranch with the help of my boss, who understood what we were trying to do and has been amazing throughout this whole thing. We were so happy that everyone involved in the planning helped us keep it quiet, so there was no hint that we were plotting something diabolical. We booked a lovely venue in town for the after-wedding party, and that was the information we did not need to hide, as it was not something that my parents would disagree with, as it was very classy. I figured that they could join us there later if they felt like it. I knew there was no chance they would come to the wedding, and so I decided that I would not be telling them that the church was not the venue. The main reason for this is because in the year running up to my wedding, I had to put up with my snide comments about how I was not doing things right, that maybe there was hope for me and I would finally give up my quote man job and become a better lady and wife. And hints about children that I should conceive as soon as possible after, of course, I was married off. Max and I decided that we don't want children, so they're going to be disappointed again in that regard. My mom and sister came with me and I went dress shopping, as they hated most of the dresses that I liked, and they hated it even more that I invited my aunt as well. The dresses my mom liked were full-on princess dresses, which are not me at all. I wanted something simple, elegant, romantic. And in the end, my grandmother told my mom to stop. Let me pick a dress I loved, as I had already agreed to a church wedding, and I had not wanted it in the first place. My sister sulked that she was not a bridesmaid and that her daughters would not be flower girls. But I decided not to have any bridesmaids to make the deception easier. I had not told anyone this, but I've spoken to my boss, and we were arranging for my favorite pony at the ranch to be my bridesmaid. It would be both adorable and absolutely hilarious. The invitations went out and we were ready to go, and I did feel a bit bad about my mom's friend who would turn up for a wedding that was not happening where they thought it was. My grandmother told me not to think about it, as they were all that as my parents were. I realized that if my dad was not there, I would have no one to walk me down the aisle, and so I asked my grandmother to do it. On the day of the wedding, I felt sick as I got ready to go, and I was so apprehensive, but the thought of marrying Max made me relax. I'm not going to go much into the detail of the actual wedding, except to say it was beautiful and everything I've ever wanted. The sun shone and I was surrounded by people who loved me and the animals who I've grown close to through work. It was perfect. The reception was not ideal to begin with, as when we arrived I was faced by furious parents who told me in great detail how humiliated they've turned up at the church and find it locked up, nobody there. How dare I betray them was screamed at me in front of everyone. The one thing that stopped my dad in his tracks was the sight of Fr. Edwards, as he walked into the room laughing alongside Grandma. The color drained from my dad's face when he realized that his own priest had sided with me. My mom was still yelling at me as she's not noticed, and Fr. Edwards walked over and looked my mom straight in the eyes. and told her to stop making a scene. He also told my dad he would love to speak with him at work the following day. And then that amazing, loving old priest went in to enjoy my wedding reception. I have to say, for two older people, Edwards and Grandma can really dance. Maybe another wedding will be coming up, LOL. My parents and sister did not stay at the reception, nor did they congratulate Max or I. I wish I could say that surprised me, but it's just how they are. Their friends have not followed them here, so I did not have to deal with them. Max and I had a wonderful time, and the following day we left for our honeymoon in Italy. Whilst we were away, my grandmother shielded me from the fallout and forbade anyone from contacting me. It was only when we got home that I found out what happened afterwards. My parents had screamed and pestered my grandmother for days, which did not look good for them as she's elderly. She stood up to them, told them that she was sick of their behavior and that they needed to look at themselves before they criticized anyone else. My parents sent me a letter saying that if I did not pay back the money that I've stolen from them, they would report me to the police and take me to court. Well, I was devastated, but my boss helped me with a lawyer who said they have no case against me. The big news is this: Edwards reported my father to the higher-ups in the church for his behavior towards me and my grandmother. Mainly because of my grandmother, I think, as he definitely has a crush on her. He was reprimanded for his behavior and has been suspended from duty until further notice, which apparently is all my fault, and most definitely not his. My parents' friends were angry they turned up for a wedding that wasn't happening. But word got out, thanks to Grandma, and a lot of them turned against my parents. Max has always said I should cut contact with my parents, and so that is what I've done. Also, my relationship with my sister is dead in the water, but this is no loss, and we've never liked each other anyways. Despite all this, I'm happy. I have my wonderful husband, my amazing grandmother, and my aunt and her wife have adopted me as their own, which is brilliant. I'm even going back to church on occasion because, Edwards is making changes I want to see. Finally, I said I don't want children, but I have a baby. He's called Benji, and he's currently chewing on my curtains as I look at him. Yeah, he's a puppy. I have a puppy. Life is good, and sometimes we have to cut off the dead weight in our lives, even if it's our own family. This was one of those stories that was just absolutely insane. I do want to take a look right now at a couple comments. The first comment says this: well, I really hate that the fact that the family had to get split up, but thank goodness for the grandmother, because without Hetty, I think OP would have had a disastrous time with, basically having to give in to the needs of her parents just so she could have the dream wedding that she wanted, even though it might have to be in a church. Now that Hetty saved her, it looks like she had the wedding that she wanted. I'm just sad it broke up the family. So it seems most of the commenters on here, they're very happy that OP was able to have her dream wedding. However, they are upset that all this broke the family up just because of their difference in religious views. So let me know your thoughts about this story, guys. Drop it in the comment section down below. If you've ever had anybody with this sort of, issue, let me know how it went. Did it go similar to the story? Let me know. Drop it in the comment section down below. Guys, that's all the stories for today. If you enjoyed it, try to subscribe by clicking that big red subscribe button. It's the #1 way to support me, and you'll never miss a video that comes out. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you tomorrow.